Alright, so let's talk Jorden Peterson and the debate. Well, the debate of freedom speech or hate speech to not use gendered pronouns, gender binary, non-binary, bullshit pronouns. But more specifically, I want to talk about his comments in terms of why he thinks this blew up in the media. This is just a simple street protest, and there's not anything particularly interesting other than a few swats and disrespectful behavior going on, essentially. I mean, yes, technically assault, but there's been assaults in a lot of different protests, and they have not gotten the media attention this one has. And I believe his comments are definitely on the money when he says it's an issue Canadians and, frankly, probably the Western world care about, but yet cannot feel that they can talk about it. And that's really interesting, is because I think in Canada, at least, for the most part, it's not that people think it's a right or wrong, at least for the conservative, on the conservative side. Maybe on the left side, they don't necessarily view it as that. But I think on the conservative side, which is mostly my experience in society, I live in a conservative society, voters that vote conservative, for the most part. In that society, they don't really talk about these things, and I think the reason why they don't talk about these things is because they just don't want to deal with the bullshit associated with it. It's not necessarily that they think these gendered pronouns are great ideas. I think they just don't want to get a backlash. And I think we're going to take myself and my own story as an anecdotal piece of evidence to kind of suggest how the average Canadian conservative in the West, the Canadian West, perceives this issue and why they simply shut their mouth, self-censor. So I grew up from childhood as basically essentially conservative. I always had conservative viewpoints in my heart because, as most people say, those who are exposed to real life reality, the value of the dollar, the reality of money, the reality of work, hard work, and jobs and getting paid. That is a conservative making machine. If schools and universities are liberal making machines, then jobs and reality are conservative making machines. That's a quote from Louder Crowder, so I'm not trying to co-opt that quote. I think it's very true and applicable here. So that was me from kind of birth, and then eventually I went through the high school system. I got some liberal socialist ideas, kind of bounced around, challenged them a little bit. I never was one for just accepting things, and I always question a lot of things. I'm definitely, I would consider myself a little bit more skeptic than a lot of other people. I always open my mouth, maybe when I shouldn't, and challenge ideas, maybe when I shouldn't, but I don't really care. I contribute that to my not giving a shit about my social appearance, and I think I gained a lot of respect for that to some extent. I played devil's advocate a lot, and it definitely gave me the respect because I had, the balls to say what I had to say when everyone else was silent. However, now in the last year, these social justice progressive ideas that I've kind of maybe picked up or gained some influence in my high school years have now kind of mostly disappeared now that I've gotten engaged in the last year or so with online political alternative media, And if I'm going to be completely honest, I actually had a real moment of self-censorship when I was actually having debate in a school, in a college, where one of my classmates basically was arguing that, the progress of Black Lives Matter banner of, all the police are racist, they shoot all the black people and stuff like that. And I basically said, well, no, that's not true. In the respect of numbers, white people are shot more in America than black people. It's a statistical fact. Boom, right here on the board. It's 100% fact. According to the fucking Guardian, which is as far progressive left as it gets, all the way from on the other side of the pond in Britain, it's just a clear stat that in numbers, in straight up numbers, white people get shot more by the police. And I think when they heard that, they really want to, they're just looking through their pocket of, what do I say, what do I say? Well, no, have you not seen all of the videos of the police shootings and all this other stuff? Well, I said those are anecdotal. Those are completely anecdotal. This is the main stats on the board, and they just wouldn't accept that. Like, you can't see that this is clearly the police being racist against the black people, you know. Well, prove it. Prove that they were shooting them because they were black. And then the next thing that I said was, it was incredibly emotionally destructive to my opponent, I guess, ideological opponent, was I said, well, actually, when they look, look at the studies and you take in account for the data, police are actually more likely to use deadly force on white people for the same crimes than black people. And the hypothesis proposed in a study done on the Philadelphia police was because they know they won't start a media firestorm of accusations of them being racist if they shoot a white person. And of course, once I said that, that was just nuclear. It was like I just dropped the nuclear bomb on their emotional stability, and they started to get really pissed off. They really started to escalate the situation. It seemed that they were emotionally invested in this topic, and that's where I think I really triggered their emotions, so to speak. They started to raise their voice. They started to escalate the volume, and I was just like, okay, whoa. This is getting to an uncomfortable level, because before this was just a civil discussion, a point of disagreement, of ideological disagreement and debate, and now this is going to a level where I, as the white man in a college, on a college campus, is going to get blamed and kicked out of college. So I'm going to shut the fuck up, basically. And even her friend sitting next to her was like, okay, calm down. It's just chill. And I shut the fuck up. And they were like, can you provide me data and evidence? And I was just like, well, no, I can't anymore, because I fear for my enrollment status at this college. I'm not shitting you, because I know how the internet works. So that's my experience with censorship. There is a clear incentive to stay fucking silent on a particular issue, because even though I might have been poking the bear a little bit, I definitely wasn't trying to be particularly nice, because I know this is a political debate, and let's face it, the truth is not always particularly round and soft and fuzzy like a nice little blanket that wraps you up, like, social justice is sometimes, and usually is a really hard fall once you kind of bring yourself back down to reality, when you've kind of given up your ideological bullshit of social justice. It definitely takes some time to realize, oh, hold on, there's some facts out there, and it's kind of like a hard awakening, where somebody just smacks you up in the face and gives you a sip of coffee, and suddenly you wake the fuck up and you're like, oh shit, and it's not particularly pretty, that's for sure. Either way, that's my story that's kind of applicable to here, because I think self-censorship is something that is very prevalent in Canadian society, because we're taught to be polite. We're taught to be respectful, mannerful, always hello, hi, yes sir, thank you, have a good day, kind of thing, and how's it going, eh? That type of thing. And whereas in America, it's more like, I don't give a fuck if you don't agree with me, you stupid liberal. You know what I mean? and Canadian society is just too polite for this conversations, for a lot of political dialogue. A lot of people just don't have these conversations. However, I think they are far more intellectually reasonable than a lot of other societies. I think they usually try to bring facts and back up their arguments, and like, oh, that's pretty interesting, oh, I'll have to think about that, and they don't rarely ever devolve into really discourse and just like, damn you, damn liberals, and you're a stupid redneck, and stupid shit like that. It never seems to really devolve to that. It definitely, whenever, in my personal experience, whenever I'm having political conversations, even on sensitive topics, we usually kind of, with friends, family, really anybody, it seems to kind of find some sort of middle ground, at least with, in my personal experience. I don't necessarily go out free speech preaching or something like that on the street corner, but I'll bring it up and like, oh, well, why did you say FTP right here? Like, do you hate all the police? And it's like, oh, well, blah blah blah. Well, are you sure that, like, all the police? Well, oh, there's some bad cops, and I've been treated like shit, like, from some bad cops. Okay, well, those are bad cops, and we kind of find some common ground, However, I just think few people in Canada either A, give a shit. Frankly, that seems to be a big thing. Is like, well, I really don't care if they want to make it illegal to not use transgender pronouns because I don't know any trannies, and I likely don't really run into them, and I'll probably never know and see them, and this probably won't affect me. Who cares? This isn't that big of a deal. I don't really give a shit. Or number two, where they just like, I'm not going to talk about that. I have political opinions, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut because somebody once told me that the three things you don't talk about are money, politics, and religion, and the only one you really should even listen to is, I guess, your personal finances, because it's a little bit of a bragging, saying, I have a wonderful company, I've made millions and millions of dollars. That's pretty inflammatory, a little bit of bragging, and just kind of douchey, to say the least. But religion and politics, I just never understood that. I've never been one of those people who really censor, unless it makes perfect sense. I've never self-centered because I just don't care about the social gratifications. If somebody doesn't want to be my friend because of my political opinions, fine, fuck them. I mean, I really don't care. And I think people have that respect for me. I've seemed to notice that I've gained a lot of respect with people. They're like, oh, okay, this guy, he has a pair of nuts, what I mean? He just doesn't care. But at the same time, it's like, I'm definitely realist. If it's going to affect me financially like it did in, college, even I will shut my mouth. But I definitely think I am an anomaly in Canadian society. We are taught to be very polite, taught to never bring up confrontational topics, never bring up politics, never bring up, topics that will contest people. The only time we ever do that is in a fucking bar, ironically, because we have a couple beers and we have no fear. We'll start bashing Trudeau quite a bit. That's a pretty safe thing to do, is bash Trudeau, so maybe that particular point is not applicable, but this clearly shows a problem with Canadian society, is we are taught to be polite and uphold this really very non-confronting culture, where we don't really confront ideas or confront certain opinions, and we just keep to our fucking selves and just be neighborly and happy and say, how's it going, eh? What's the weather like, eh? Let's talk about the hockey game, eh? And never talk about politics, because that might have some disagreement there. And I think that's Canadians, if you really want to get down to it. An American will boast their opinion as loudly as possible, but may not be so susceptible to reason and maybe reasonable arguments, whereas Canadians, I think, are very orientated in, I guess, maybe logic, and I don't want to say that we're smarter than Americans, because a lot of people say that, and maybe it has to do with American schools being fucking shit. Let's be honest. I think most people can agree that American schools are fucking shit. My experience in the Canadian school system, public school system, was not very bad at all. Let's face it. I had a lot of good teachers growing up, and I doubt a lot of poor Americans in poor areas had good teachers growing up. Maybe they did have some, but not the majority. But I feel Canadian culture is not really just we're smarter, we're more educated, or something like that. I think it's more if we have a very realist approach to life, and I think that might have something to do with the problem-solving stat that Canadians excel at compared to the rest of the entire world. We have the highest level of problem-solving, and I don't really know necessarily where that comes from. Maybe it comes from a very realistic perspective on the world, where we look at data rather than feelings, what we feel most of the time, and I'm really not sure. I definitely want to look into this, and this has always been something that's pondered my mind ever since I've been approached with the concept of, well, Canada doesn't really have an identity. Bollocks! It has something. I'm just not, I can't put my finger on it, neither can you, and I'm trying my hardest. But it's definitely, the politeness is definitely not a good way. I think we can all come to a real problem-solving solution, but we just never talk about it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. And if you hated it, send your hate mail in the comments, because I usually respond to that because I'm a small channel and I can afford to do that. Can afford to that, not can't, if you misheard me. Now, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one, and have a good day,